Ellie had always been the center of my world. When I first saw her, it felt like someone had turned on a light in a darkened room. She had this way of making everything around her brighter. Her laughter, her kindness, the little things she'd do to make people feel special. I was hooked from the start, and when she agreed to go on a date with me, I felt like the luckiest guy alive. We had a whirlwind romance. Ellie was vibrant and adventurous, and she brought out a side of me I didn't know existed. Together, we built a life that I thought was unshakable. We traveled, we grew together, and when we got married, it felt like the culmination of something extraordinary. For years, we were happy. Sure, life got busy. I was climbing the corporate ladder, and Ellie was pouring her heart into her art. But we had each other's backs, always. We knew each other's rhythms, and we navigated the ups and downs of life as a team. At least, that's what I thought. The first time I noticed something was off, it was a small thing. Ellie had started spending more time at her studio. It wasn't unusual. When she was deep into a project, she often lost track of time. But lately, she'd been coming home later and later, with vague explanations that didn't quite add up. I had to run out for more supplies, she'd say. Or, I got caught up chatting with a client. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was an artist, after all. Her work wasn't a 9 to 5 kind of job. But then there were the phone calls. She'd step out of the room when her phone rang, speaking in a low voice that I couldn't make out. When I asked who it was, she'd say, "Oh, just another gallery owner." Still, I ignored the growing unease in my gut. I told myself it was all in my head, that Ellie was just busy with her career, that I needed to be more understanding. But as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I found a receipt on the counter. It was for a fancy restaurant on the other side of town. The date on the receipt was a night Ellie had told me she was working late at the studio. I asked her about it, and she didn't even blink. "Oh, that's from last week," she said. "I had dinner with a gallery owner who's interested in my new series. I meant to tell you about it, but I guess it slipped my mind." Her explanation sounded reasonable, but the way she said it felt too smooth, too rehearsed. I tried to shake off the doubt, but it lingered. Then there was the text message. It popped up on her phone while she was in the shower. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the screen lit up right in front of me. The message was from someone named Chris, and it said, "Can't wait to see you again." My heart sank. I didn't know who Chris was, and I couldn't think of any reason why someone would send that kind of message to my wife. When Ellie came out of the shower, I confronted her. "Who's Chris?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked surprised, then quickly said, "Oh, he's just a friend from one of my art classes. We've been meeting up to discuss some new techniques. It's nothing, really." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But the unease was becoming impossible to ignore. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more little signs. The way Ellie would smile at her phone, the way she suddenly started dressing up more for her studio time, the way she seemed more distracted, more distant. Our conversations felt strained, as if she was holding something back. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stayed up late, waiting for her to come home. When she finally walked through the door, I asked her point-blank, "Are you seeing someone else?" Her face paled, and for a moment, I thought she was going to deny it. But then she sighed and sat down across from me. "It's not what you think," she said. "I'm not having an affair. Chris is just a friend, I promise. But I guess I've been feeling a little lost lately." "Lost?" I repeated. "What does that mean?" She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. "I don't know. I've been questioning a lot of things, my art, my direction in life, and maybe us too. It's not that I don't love you. I do. But I feel like I'm losing myself, and Chris, he's been someone I can talk to about it. That's all it is, I swear." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to trust that she was just going through a rough patch and that Chris was nothing more than a sounding board. But the doubts remained. I told her we needed to work on things, really work on them. She agreed. We started spending more time together, having long talks about our future, about what we wanted and what needed to change. For a while, it seemed like things were getting better. But then I noticed she was still texting Chris. Still meeting up with him, though she always told me about it now. She said it was all above board, that she needed a friend who understood her art world. I tried to be supportive. I tried to believe that this was all it was. And then one evening, I saw them together. I had left work early and decided to surprise Ellie at her studio. But when I arrived, I saw her through the window, sitting close to Chris. He was laughing at something she said, his hand resting on hers. My stomach turned. I stood there, watching, unable to move, unable to breathe. When Ellie looked up and saw me, her face froze. She quickly pulled her hand back, but the damage was done. I walked in, my heart pounding. "What's going on here?" I demanded. Chris stood, looking flustered. "I should go," he said, grabbing his bag. Ellie stopped him. "No, wait," she said. "John, it's not what it looks like." "It never is," I said bitterly. Chris left, and Ellie turned to me, tears in her eyes. "I swear it's not an affair," she said. "We're just close friends, that's all. He's been helping me work through my feelings, my doubts. I never meant to hurt you." "Helping you?" I said, my voice shaking. "Ellie, this looks like more than just friendship. And if you can't see that, then I don't know how to fix this." She cried, begging me to believe her, to give her another chance. But my trust was shattered. I left the studio that night, not knowing if our marriage could survive what I'd seen. For the first time since we'd met, I felt like I didn't know who Ellie really was. The woman I loved was now a stranger to me, and I didn't know if I could ever find my way back to her. I spent that night in my car, parked at a quiet lot overlooking the city skyline. I needed to think, to breathe, to make sense of what was happening. I stared at the city lights, the weight of my suspicions pressing down on me like a stone. The world kept spinning, oblivious to the chaos in my head. Ellie texted me several times, asking where I was, begging me to come home so we could talk. But I couldn't face her. Not yet. Her image in that studio, laughing, her hand under his, was burned into my mind. I couldn't unsee it. The next morning, I finally went home. She was waiting for me in the living room, her face pale and drawn. The moment I walked through the door, she started talking. "John, please let me explain," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm listening," I said, my tone colder than I intended. She launched into a long explanation. She insisted that Chris had never been more than a friend, that she was struggling with her identity as an artist, that her career had become her whole world, and she felt lost. He was someone who understood that side of her life, someone who could relate in a way I couldn't. "I know it looks bad," she admitted, her eyes filled with tears. "But I never crossed that line. I never cheated on you, John." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust the woman I'd built my life with. But trust isn't something you can will back into existence. It has to be earned, and it's fragile once broken. "You're telling me you didn't have an affair," I said. "But you kept this relationship a secret. You lied about where you were. You let it get to the point where you were sitting there, holding his hand, and you're asking me to believe that none of it meant anything." She shook her head. "It wasn't what it looked like. I swear I just felt comforted by him. I felt understood. But it's you I love. It's you I want to be with. Then why couldn't you talk to me?" I asked, my voice rising. "Why couldn't you tell me you were struggling? I would have done anything to help you, Ellie. But you didn't give me that chance. Instead, you turned to someone else." She started to cry again, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the old compassion I had for her. But it wasn't enough. The pain, the doubt, the betrayal, it was all too much. "I can't do this," I said quietly. "I can't keep wondering if you're telling the truth. I can't keep questioning everything you say. That's not a marriage." She stared at me, her tears falling freely. "John, please," she whispered. "Please don't give up on us. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll go to counseling. I'll do anything you need me to do. Just give me a chance." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, and I felt a deep sadness. I didn't want to end it. I didn't want to lose her. But I also knew I couldn't stay in a relationship that felt like it was held together by a thread. "I don't think I can forgive you," I said, my voice breaking. "Not because I don't want to, but because I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. And without trust, there's nothing left." Her sobs filled the room, and I walked away. I packed a bag and left the house that day, staying with a friend while I figured out what to do next. Over the following weeks, we started the process of separating. It was painful, more painful than I could have imagined. We divided our belongings, worked out a schedule for Lily, and tried to keep things civil for her sake. I couldn't bear to hear Ellie's apologies anymore, and she eventually stopped trying. It took time, months of soul-searching, therapy, and leaning on my friends, to start feeling like myself again. I focused on being the best father I could be for Lily, and I threw myself into my work. Slowly, I began to heal. Eventually, I met someone new. She was kind, patient, and honest. She didn't try to rush me, didn't push me to move faster than I was ready. With her, I found something I thought I'd lost forever: trust. Looking back, I realized that Ellie's betrayal had taught me something important. It taught me to value open communication, to never take trust for granted, and to recognize when a relationship has reached its breaking point. Now, years later, I've built a life I'm proud of. The scars remain, but they no longer define me. I found love again, and more importantly, I found peace. For that, I'm grateful.